Hey, how's it going, folks? Welcome back for another Mandolin Mornings sessions. I hope you guys are doing well. Wherever you are out in the world, I hope you've been enjoying some mandolin this past week. So thanks so much for tuning in this morning. And as you may have noticed, we actually aren't currently live. You're currently hearing from a past self, and it's all because Tabitha and I are actually abroad right now. We've been traveling for the past few days, and we're actually back over in Northern Ireland with Tabitha's family for a little bit. Went over for some routine medical appointments for Tabitha, and we're just taking the advantage of the time to go see Tabitha's family, get to reconnect with Ruben and Benjamin, and we'll be making a bunch of new music with Cup of Joe over the next few weeks. So unfortunately, I'm sad to not be able to be with you here live to be able to answer your questions, but a future David, or I guess a present David, when you're watching this, will be in the chat thread here, the live chat over on YouTube. So if you have any additional questions as we go through the stream, I'll be there. I'll be there responding to all your questions. And we're going to take the chance to look at some more in-depth topics through these live streams, or these premieres, so to speak, over the next few weeks here. And we did a vote over on Patreon, and you guys crushed it. You sent in so many votes, and I appreciate you guys participating and let me know what you guys are interested in. And one of the biggest topics by far was the idea of fiddle tune improvisation. So I thought today we could take a little bit of a deeper dive into that concept. And if you have any specific questions as we go through my personal process, you can always do so in the chat, and I'll get back to you with some text replies there. But hey, why don't we start off with a little bit of playing? So if you have your mandolin nearby, grab it, tune it up. We'll be in the key of G here, and I thought we'd take a chance to look at Big Sciota, since you saw we just posted a big lesson on that this week. At least that's what I'm planning to, at least. Let's come over to Tune Time and pick a tune together. So, Big Sciota, if you watched the video, I explained how this is kind of like the first tune that I really ran through the paces, and I thought it'd be a great tune to kind of start off with for this live stream to talk about fiddle tune improvisation, because as I mentioned, this was one of the first tunes I learned up and down the neck in different areas. I transcribed a Sam Bush solo, and I composed my own solo, which hopefully you got a chance to look at in that video as well. So, if you spent some time playing that this week, I thought this would be a good opportunity to try out some of those ideas. And then after we play this tune, we'll take some time to really break things down, and I'll share with you a little bit more about my process when it comes to improvising over this tune. But why don't we try this out? If you're coming to this tune for the very first time, again, like I mentioned, we're in the key of G here. We've got 4 different chords throughout the tune, and we've got G major, right? You got your open G, you got your open D major chord. That's another good one. Open C if you want to, and then lastly in the B part we also have this E minor chord. So I like to play this E minor like this. It's 4-2-2 open. You can check out the chord diagrams for this tune and all the other tunes that we looked at over on Patreon if you're interested too. And if you want to, you can also play the chop chords. This is a good tune to work on the chops, because you switch back and forth between that G and D so much. And I sometimes like to use my 4th finger for the D chord like this, with the 4th finger on the 7th fret of the G string, which I know is a bit of a stretch for some people, but a great opportunity to keep working on that here for this tune. But let me just find a good tempo here on my metronome, and we'll try this out. You guys know how it works, back and forth. I'll start us off with a melody, then let you take a solo while I play the chords, and then we can trade off. I'll take a solo back and forth. How about we start this out at like maybe 80 beats per minute? Here we're feeling that click on the half note, so 2 clicks a measure. So it should sound something like this. So not too fast, but not too slow either. I think that'll be a good tempo to start off with this morning. So I'll start us off with some potatoes. Make sure I'm in tune here. Something like this. It goes. Onto that B. All right, your turn. So we have a G to a D, back to G. Same thing. Now to a C chord, D, back to G again. Do all that again. So we have D, back to G, G, D, G, G, C, D, G. So here we go to a D on the second measure of the B section. Now to that C chord. Now to E minor. D, back to G. All right, I'll take a solo here. Your turn. To the B section here, to that D chord. All right, let's see if we can play this melody together to close it out. Nice work, folks. Awesome job playing through this tune. One of my favorites. So let's hop over back to the main scene and we'll break this down even further. All right, so hopefully you could hear in my improvised solo there, it wasn't as good as I wanted it to be, but I was trying to draw on some aspects that you might have picked up if you watched the lesson. So first off, you might have noticed that I've copied my own solo. I plagiarized myself for the very first phrase of that solo. And I think that's one of the main benefits of writing out something on your own, is because you have the freedom to draw from it in the moment. You don't have to play the whole thing note for note, but you can play bits and pieces of it here or there. And you're always going to be better off for having put in that work to really understand the tune better and figure out how you can play something new over the chord changes. But you realize I didn't stay there too. I decided to do something different on the second A section. I think on the second phrase of the first A, I believe. And I went to a lower octave for a little bit and played around with the melody down on the G and the D strings here. And then I think by the time the B section rolled around, I was off on a tangent doing something totally different, which I think is kind of like a good opportunity to try new stuff. Once you've established, the melody of the tune and tried it out in a few different spots, like maybe on that first B section, that could be a good opportunity to go off the neck like I did, or to try a different melody. And then towards the end of the second B section, that's where I brought it back home. I played a little bit of that tag lick of that melody to give it a little bit more context as I was coming back to trade off and let you guys take a solo. And that's kind of a pretty well-established roadmap that you can follow if you want to. Try to think of the melody as your through line, and then use some of the other stuff that you've been working on as little added elements. Like solo you've been composing for a tune. You could use some of the fretboard navigation stuff that we've talked about to find your way up and down the neck. You could use, like another transcribed solo from, my version. You can more than welcome to learn my version and play bits of it at the jam or the whole thing if you want to. Or, you can check out Sam Bush's solo. I talked about that in the lesson video too, from that Skip Hop and Wobble record. We even have that solo over on Patreon too if you want to check it out if you haven't already. Once you've spent some time really, digging into those things and understanding how this works, it just gives you a lot of options to choose from, right? So, just to cover our bases here, though, I have kind of this unpatented 5-step process to mastering a fiddle tune to feel more confident improvising over it. And don't steal it from me; it's unpatented. But and it doesn't cover all the aspects that you can approach. But I think it's a pretty well-rounded, a pretty well-rounded step thing. Is that the right thing? I think it is. Well, anyways, it's just a good place to start when you're coming to a tune to understand it better and feel more confident playing it. And the first step is pretty obvious. Like, just learn the melody, learn the chords, memorize it and internalize it, and feel comfortable playing it at a few different tempos, right? So you can just take that transcription. We've got it over on Patreon for the basic melody and the chords, and just spend some time playing it like we've just done here together. Maybe even using those backing tracks over on Patreon as a way of kind of cementing this in a little bit more. And then after you've done that, the second step, something I talk a lot about in our lesson videos as well, is trying to figure out how you can play this melody in different octaves or in different places around the neck. And Big Sciota is one I like to do this a lot. It actually works out in a few different situations, I should say. Like, first up, you can play the melody in a lower octave like I was hinting at earlier. You just have to change some of the notes around since we don't have all the available real estate that we need to play some of the melody notes that we were playing in the original octave. So instead of being like instead of walking up to that G, since we can't play those D and E notes in a lower octave, we might have to do something like this, where we're walking down to the G. You can step down from the B to the A down to the G. And play something that sounds a lot like the melody, even if it is a bit different. And that's kind of one of the fun challenges of this step in the process, too, is you're starting to see how the melody can take on some different qualities, but it still has the same through line. That's the hope, seeing if you can figure out how to play a melody in a new situation like this, taking into account the register of the mandolin, the fingerings that present themselves better in this particular area of the mandolin, and seeing if you can, play something accordingly that still sounds like the mandolin, or still sounds like the melody, I should say, on the mandolin. So the lower octave is a great opportunity for this tune. I didn't talk about this in the video, but you could play the A section like this. And then the B section works even better in the lower octave. You don't really have to change much. You can do something like this. Like that. And I'm not even looking at a piece of paper. I'm just trying to think of how I know the melody in the original octave and figuring it out in that lower octave. If you can, that's probably even a better approach instead of looking at a transcription for a lower octave, is to see if you can figure it out by ear on your own, because you're strengthening that bond between what you hear in your head, a melody that you already know, and figuring out how it works in a different spot on the mandolin. So you're strengthening the bond between what you hear and what you can play, which is really helpful for improvising, I should say. So that's step 2. See if you can learn the melody in a different octave, but kind of bundled in with this step is to see if you can also play the melody in a different position up and down the neck. And this melody works out probably in a couple different places. The first area that I might start with is with your index finger on this G root on the 5th fret of the D string. And you can play a pretty similar version of the melody with mostly just these 3 fingers, but you might have to use your pinky a little bit since we're in closed position. It goes something like this. Then the A section, or the B section I should say, would be something like this. Something like that. maybe a couple different notes in there, but you get the idea. You can work that out by ear, and once you have those two different options, the lower octave and the version up the neck, you'll have 3 different ways of playing this tune, which means you'll have 3 as many like sources to draw from when it comes to improvising. Of course, like we've talked about on some of our lesson videos, that it's helpful to try to transition from one octave to the next as well. This just kind of gives you like an even deeper understanding of how the melodies connect together. Like you could do 4 measures on the original octave for the A section, and then 4 measures on the lower octave for the A section. Or you could do the same thing, like maybe you could do the original octave for 4 measures on the B section, and then follow it up with 4 measures of the higher up the neck version. Let's see if I can even do this, but it'd be a... You could probably do a better job than me, but you get the idea. Trying to put these all together in different ways is going to help you break the melody apart and be able to put it back together in new ways when it comes time to improvise over a tune like this. And I think having a strong emphasis on the melody right here at the start is really important, because within the bluegrass genre, there's an expectation for a player to really know the melody well and to reference it a lot in their solo. There's exceptions, of course, like Tony Rice didn't play the melody a lot of the times. He just played a lot of really cool licks and people loved him, right? So obviously, you can do different stuff, but I think, I don't know, I've heard a lot of great musicians say that it's more tasteful to reference the melody, or at least pay homage to the melody. I think Chris Steele said that. I know a lot of other musicians have that same type of mindset when it comes to playing in a bluegrass setting. So Big Scioto is a fun melody. I want to kind of point or make a nod to that melody in my own solo, even if I am doing something different. So learning the melody in all these different situations is really going to do that. It's just, again, expanding that safety net of options that you can fall back onto if you find yourself getting lost or trying something new and needing to get back to the source material. So that's step 2, seeing if you can learn the melody in a bunch of different places up and down the neck. Step 3 is something I haven't talked a whole lot about on the Patreon site, but it's something that I feel like is really valuable, and hopefully it just comes across by the number of transcriptions that we have on the site. There's tons of transcriptions there, but number 3 is see if you can transcribe a solo for the same tune from another player. And it's pretty nice in bluegrass. Like there's a lot of great professional recordings of traditional jam standards, like Big Scioto, for instance. You can go and transcribe Sam Bush playing this tune if you want to, and a number of other great mandolin players. And once you've learned their approach to a tune like this, it's great because you can just kind of copy and paste their ideas onto the same song that you might be playing in a jam. So, by learning that Sam Bush triplet lick that I took advantage of in my solo, I can really easily throw that into my solo. And Big Scioto, I can take that to another tune in the key of G really easily too. It's just gonna expand your vocabulary and give you some more options to choose from too. So number 3, that's a big one. We won't talk about it too much here. If you've never transcribed a solo before, I know it can be a bit of a kind of a daunting experience or daunting prospect just thinking about starting it. But I definitely recommend using some really helpful computer software, like the Amazing Slowdowner is a program that is a little expensive, but it's really worth the investment because you can change the speed of a recording without affecting the tempo. So you can slow down Sam Bush's version of this solo to 30-40% and learn it note for note. And basically what transcribing comes down to is trying to match notes to what you're hearing. So you have your mandolin in hand and you think, okay, like, what are those first notes that Sam plays? It's like, okay, like I hear that. Okay, like that open D string sounds like the first note that he's playing because it lines up with the resonance and the frequencies of that note that he's playing. And you can kind of just hear the open D sound. The open D has a certain resonance to it that the other notes don't. And seeing if you can do that for all the notes. Just bit by bit, you're kind of just, chiseling away at it until you get to the end. And sometimes it can be helpful to do this on paper. That way you have like a written reference for what you're learning. But honestly, now I just try to transcribe by ear, where I'm kind of learning it and memorizing it in the moment from the recording without actually writing it down. A lot of people refer to that as transcribing as well, even though it might be confusing since you're not actually writing anything out. But it's the same idea, and sometimes it's more effective just to learn it from the source and be able to play it along with the source as you're learning it. I feel like I learn it faster and I learn it more thoroughly that way than just having a written reference. But either way, it's helpful, like seeing if you can just internalize another player's solo of a song like this. It just adds so many benefits. For one, like you're getting inside another player's head, right? You're seeing what type of licks they're using, what's their story arc for the entire solo too. You know, like we talked about the structure of mine, how I went up the neck in the B section and I came back down to the melody at the end. Like, how do other players approach that type of development in their solo as well? That's another thing to keep in mind. And yeah, again, just copy and pasting licks as you want to, and this solo or another solos. So that's step number 3, see if you can transcribe a solo from another player. And step 4 is kind of getting along to what I was saying at the end of the Big Scioto lesson video, where I want to challenge you guys to come up with your own solo ahead of time. And I didn't mention in the video, but there are a lot of players who do this. Like, for instance, I've talked to Jacob Jolliffe, who does this for his solo recordings, like that Instrumental Volumes 1. He spent a lot of time thinking out ahead of time what he wanted to play for his solos for all those songs, which is great. You know, Jacob is such an amazing player who can do all this stuff off the cuff, but it just goes to show you that, you know, he has a lot of intentionality in everything that he plays. Like, he wants to make sure everything that he records is exactly the way he wants to. I've heard the same from John Reichman. He's done the same for like Up in the Woods and the Walk Along John records. You know, it's cool, like hearing there's this really interesting show. It's called like the Acoustic All Stars. It was from some venue in Virginia. You can find like a kind of like a bootleg live recording of this show. Basically, it's Bela Fleck's band from the record Drive. If you know that record, we've looked at some of that stuff on Patreon too, and just hearing them play there, it's like right after the Drive session actually, and they're playing some of the tunes that are on that record that haven't been released yet, and they're just fresh off the block. And hearing like Bela's solo in particular over that Whitewater tune, you can hear all the same aspects of his solo from the recording. So it's like obvious that he spent some time planning it out. Maybe there's some variance here and there, but he's definitely starting with that pre-planned material. So like an amazing artist like Bela Fleck, who is a master improviser, has done stuff like this. I think it's just helpful to see from you know, examples of other great players out there to be like, okay, like I don't have to feel guilty about writing out a solo, because when I'm honest with myself, I feel like that's cheating. You know, it feels like I should just be good enough to be able to improvise a solo in the moment and not worry about it. But yeah, it's not always the case. And I know that by spending the time planning out something ahead of time like this, I'll have, again, more options to choose from. That's the main theme here, is that we want to work something to bits. Like we want to tear things apart. We want to do as many things as possible to prepare ourselves for the jam. That way we have all this material to stand on, which gives us, you know, the opportunity to try something new if we want to in the moment, but we can always fall back on all the stuff we worked out. There's a quote from Noam Pikilny. I heard him talk at a workshop one time, you know, the great banjo player from the Punch Brothers. He said that the way he learned to improvise was writing 5 solos to Whiskey Before Breakfast, I believe. And I've never done that, actually. I've only written like maybe 1 or 2 solos for a song, but that stands to measure like just how amazing he is at improvising. You know, he spent that much time thinking about all the possibilities that he could play over a tune like that. You know, you get to know the chord changes super well by doing this. You get to know the arpeggios for the song, like what are the chord tones, what are the melody notes, the you know, the target notes that you want to take advantage of. It's all there, you know, once you spend the time writing out 5 solos for a tune. And you don't have to do 5, but I encourage you to try to write at least 1 solo for a tune like this. Big Scioto could be a good option. And if you learn like your own solo and you learn Sam Bush's solo, then that's awesome. You got so many things to choose from in the moment. So that's number 4, is compose your own solo for a tune like this. And then, you know, coming in step 5 here, coming in hot to 5, this is where it gets a little bit more open-ended. I call this step improv challenges. This is where you kind of forget all that stuff that you've worked on, like the melody, your own solo, the solo you transcribed from another player, and you try to just improvise over the chord changes for the tune. This is where those backing tracks over on Patreon are going to be really handy. But we've talked about some of these challenges in other videos, like for Cold Frosty Morning, we talked about how a great way to improvise is to see if you can play the melody for 2 measures and then do an improvised melody for another 2 measures and try to get back to the melody for the following 2 measures. So like for Big Scioto, you could think, okay, I'll play the first 2 measures of the melody. And then for the next 2 measures, I have to do something different, like a... And then I have to get back to the melody after that. And then improvise. So, if you put that all together, it might sound something like this. Something like that, yeah. Excuse my tastelessness, but yeah, that's a great way of structuring your improvisation, because otherwise, improv can be such a big, open-ended topic that you just don't know where to start, right? Let me know in the comments if you feel that way too, because that is my sentiment. It's like, whoa, improv seems like overwhelming because I don't know where to start. I don't know what quantifies like a good solo over a bad solo sometimes. It's like, maybe I shouldn't even just try. That's like my thought process or my internal struggle is when I come to improvising. It's really hard to practice it too, because it seems like, it's like, it's basically playing something that you don't know yet. And it seems like, well, how can I play something I don't know? Or, how can I, again, like measure how good it is if I don't know what it is? And, that's where these improv challenges come in real handy, because it gives you some type of structure to operate within. I'm a huge fan of structure because I think that's kind of like a deep human truth. Is like we need limitations in order to be free in some weird way. That's what Igor Stravinsky said when the great neoclassical composer. He said there's perfect freedom in limitations, and I think he's right. Like when you give yourself limitations like this, you're going to be forced to come up with new things, because otherwise, if you leave it so open-ended, I'm just going to play, okay, this is that lick that I like, and I'm just going to play that lick every time I play this tune because it's familiar and I know it sounds okay, so I'm just going to lean on that too much. But when it comes to improvising and actually pushing yourself to try something new, that's where these structures come in real handy. So try that 2-measure idea over this tune, but there's some other ones as well that we've seen from other videos, right? Like, another interesting one is using arpeggios to kind of play out the chord changes. We did this for Snowflake Reel as well, right? You can do the same thing for Big Scioto here. If you know like your arpeggios, you can do something like this. Like that, where you can hear the chord changes unfolding at the same rate as they do in the song, but you're just playing single notes. You're just playing the chord tones of each chord as they pass by and starting on the root of the next chord that comes along. And we won't get too deep into that now, but you can figure that out on your own if you want to, or check out the Snowflake Reel to see how it works over that tune. And once you learn the arpeggios for the chord changes, you can do stuff like this, where maybe you try improvising using mostly arpeggio notes, but you don't always start on the root. Maybe you like throw in a couple extra notes as connecting notes too. Maybe something like this, like a I'm sure you can do a better job than I did, but just to show you how it really informs the way that I play. It doesn't sound like I would normally play that. It just forces me to do something different, to see those chord tones a little bit more clear. And here are just a couple more improv challenges as well. I don't know if you've gotten a chance to try this out in other videos, but another good one is to see if you can improvise only up the neck. Like, what if you said, okay, you can't go beneath the 5th fret or use any open strings? Like, how would you improvise over this tune? I don't know, something like this. Just like force yourself to see what it feels like to play up there if you're not comfortable with it. That could be one option, or another option would be see if you can use all 8th notes, right? I've been trying to do that throughout all these exercises because I find that's really, really tough, because when I'm improvising, it's so easy to be like, okay, like slow down or take pauses, and before I know it, I've lost track of where I am in the song. And in bluegrass in particular, we have this kind of expectation to play constant eighth notes throughout the entire song. So that's something to really try to train into your right hand. See if you can improvise just using all eighth notes. And then an extra challenge is to see if you can do it without doing like repeated notes on the same pitch, because that wouldn't be the point of the exercise. We're trying to push ourselves to do new stuff here. So you could do something like this. Something like that. Any of those would be a good place to start, but improv challenges, again, just help you get beyond your normal bag of tricks and helps you get beyond the inhibition of getting started as well. So that's step 5, improv challenges. And we've covered a lot of ground already. I'm sorry if I'm overloading you. And future David, I hope you're catching up with all the comments on the live chat there. Keep them coming. Thanks so much for participating in this conversation. And I think you'll find that once you go through all these 5 steps, learning the melody and chords first, learning the melody in different octaves up and down the neck, transcribing a solo of another player, composing your own solo for the song, and then improv challenges where you forget all that and try like limiting yourself doing something weird like the exercises we mentioned. Once you do all that work, you're gonna have you're gonna know this tune like the back of your hand, I guess I should say. It's like you're gonna have such a familiarity and such a intimate knowledge of the ins and outs of this tune that you're not gonna worry too much when it comes to actually improvising, because it's hard to practice improvising, right? It's like hard to know what the merit is on your own. I feel like I don't really know how to improvise by myself sometimes. I feel like I have to feel it and experience it in conversation with other live musicians, which has been a hard part about this pandemic for sure. But when you're at the jam, all of a sudden you have this crystal clear clarity of why all this is so important, and you also get a really good instant feedback of where you are in this process. And I find whenever I do all these 5 things with a tune, I have such a leg up when it comes to actually improvising when the time comes to play with real people. And I'd be curious to hear your experience too. Like if you guys have done any of this stuff in the past over tunes like Big Scioto or other tunes, like what's been your experience? Like how has this affected your approach to improvisation when the time comes? It's almost like I'm trying to just build in this muscle memory and this facility for a tune ahead of time, and I'm just trusting on that experience when it comes to actually improvising. Like I know the melody in different octaves, I know the chords, I know this transcribed solo, I know my own composed solo, and I've done all these kind of weird improv challenges to it. It's like, okay, like I've explored a lot of the options. Let's just see what happens. And that's when I've been able to improvise best, I feel like, is when I've done all that work and just trusted myself to actually do something. So I know we've been doing a lot of talking, but I want to make sure that we leave some time for playing so that you can try all this out. So let's come back over to tune time and see if we can implement some of these 5 steps that we've been talking about. So let's see. Another tune that we haven't looked at yet on the site, but we will very soon, is this tune Forked Deer, or Forked Deer. I don't even know how to pronounce it, but it's in the key of D major, and I like this tune because the melody works out really well in a couple different situations, right? You can play the melody in the original octave here, or you can play it down in a lower octave. Same with the B section here. You can do the original octave, or you can do it up here, up the neck. Just a lot of great options to start with, and there's some great solos to transcribe for this one. You can hear like Mike Compton playing this one with David Greer on a David Greer record, and several other recordings as well. Go pick one of your favorites and see if you can transcribe it, and then sit down and write your own solo for this tune as well. And then we're gonna do some of those improv challenges right here. I know you're gonna have time to do all that before we get started right now. No, but these are all just things to add to your practice list as we keep going forward. So let's get out that metronome again and see if we can try some of this stuff out. And maybe we'll take a couple passes of this, and I'll give you some challenges as we play through the tune, just to think about as you're improvising here. So let's just, bump it up just ever so slightly from before. Here we're at 85 beats per minute. By the way, if you don't know this song, there's only 3 chords, and we're in the key of D, like I mentioned. So if you know your D major scale, that's going to be a good place to try to improvise a new melody, even if you don't know the melody to start with. Just kind of noodle around that D major scale here, and try your best to follow along with the chords if you can. And then the chords are pretty simple again, right? It's just D, G, and that A chord as well. So let's not think about it too much though. Let's give this a shot. I'll play through the melody first to get us started. Here we go. Alright, your turn. So we got a D chord followed by a G chord, D chord, and then A. D, G, and then this quick D, G, A, D. All that again. D, G. Alright, try improvising using eighth notes here. All eighth notes, no stopping, no repeated notes, just all eighth notes. Long A chord. Alright, I'm going to try to improvise using the arpeggios if you want to follow along. Alright, your turn again. Alright, for the B section here, see if you can improvise above the 5th fret. No using your open strings. Alright, let's see if we can play this melody together. Something like that. Go. Nice work, folks. Awesome job. I hope that was fun and challenging, trying out some of these different challenges over this tune. Let me know in the comments here what you thought. And be sure to try some of this stuff out on your own time as well. So, 5 steps, right? 5 steps, just to review. We got learn the melody and the chords, learn the melody in different octaves and different positions on the neck, transcribe a solo from another player, compose your own solo, and then give yourself all these weird challenges for a tune. And yeah, I think that's a great solid approach. Let me know in the comments too if you have any other additional things that you think we should add to the list here. Might be a 6 or a 7-step process. It's the patent hasn't come through, so we can change the numbers if we need to here. But yeah, I think doing all this stuff, having just a focus on the melody in particular is going to be helpful. And we haven't even really talked much about the mechanics of the music theory. And you'll notice that's actually kind of an intentional thing on my part to leave all that stuff out, because improvising doesn't need to fall back on all that. I think improvising is mostly about trying just to play something and seeing what happens and seeing what doesn't. Obviously, you can know like your scales and your arpeggios, like we talked about, or you can figure out stuff up the neck and all these technical things, but that shouldn't really keep you back from improvising. If you can learn a melody, by transcription or by ear or something like that, if you can learn forked D or a big sciota, then there's all sorts of things that you can do to start improvising, like learning the melody in different octaves, or learning the melody up the neck, or trying to figure out how another player plays this melody. It doesn't even have to be a solo. You could transcribe the way Mike Compton plays this melody, and that's going to give you even more options to choose from. So don't even worry about that. Obviously you can think about the D major scale, those arpeggios we were talking about, but just start improvising, and that'll be the main thrust of getting better. It's interesting. Like, if you don't improvise, you probably won't be getting too much better at it. And it's like a lot of things in music. It's like we have this thought of like, okay, I should probably be getting better at improvising, but if I don't actually practice it, is there any proof that I'm actually getting better at it? So just spend some time, like leave 15 minutes in your practice session every day to improvise. And you might notice a big progress, like over the course of a week or a month or a couple months. Like you'll definitely feel a lot more confident doing stuff like this, especially if you go through a 5-step process like this for a tune and then try improvising over it. So that's my challenge to you guys this week. Is like, take a tune like Big Sciota or another tune that we've been looking at over on Patreon or on YouTube, and see if you can do all these 5 things. Learn the melody chords, different octaves, up the neck, transcribe a solo, compose your own solo, and then just practice improvising, doing some weird stuff like this. Yeah, I think it's one of the most rewarding aspects of the mandolin, improvising, at least in my experience. Like, feeling as though you can experience a tune fresh for I don't know. It's like every time you come to the tune, you have a new perspective on it, I should say. So that's a wonderful feeling. I want you guys to feel that too. It just kind of frees you up to do whatever you want to over a song within the guidelines of the repertoire and of the practice and of the genre that we're in here. But it kind of sets you free in a cool way. So I'm excited to hear what this does for you guys. Let me know. Stay in touch. We'll be out abroad for the next couple of weeks, so we'll be doing a couple more premiere Mandolin Morning sessions. But you can tune in next week at 11 a.m. Eastern on Saturday, and we'll be doing a lot of this stuff. Next week, we're going to be talking about double stops, and we got a new lesson coming up, if all things goes to plan, of 9-pound hammer in 3 different keys that uses a lot of different double stop shapes. So I'm excited for you guys to check that out and dig into it, and we're going to dissect all that stuff in our next session. Again, you can get all the transcriptions for these tunes and for all the stuff we're talking about over on Patreon. There's a link in the video description below here on YouTube. And yeah, thanks for all of you guys for tuning in. Thanks to all the patrons who are here too. You guys are amazing. Yeah, look forward to connecting with you guys sometime soon. But until then, happy picking.